So about a year ago, I posted a video in which I presented evidence pointing out that in The Simpsons, the town of Springfield is most likely located in Kentucky. Now obviously, I know that the writers of the show have planted a ton of contradictory evidence to make Springfield's home state a mystery as well as a running gag, so there is no one conclusive answer. Nevertheless, I think I made a pretty good case for Kentucky being the home state. However, I did not watch all 639 episodes of the show immediately prior to making that video, so I can't claim to have encyclopedic knowledge. Nevertheless, I think that the theory holds water, or at least more water than most. Nevertheless, intriguing new evidence has come to light. Well, not exactly new, but from episodes I've watched in the meantime. And while some of it could be used to confirm the Kentucky hypothesis, some of it has actually made me rethink my position and propose an alternative, or should I say, a compromise, solution. So keep watching and I'll explain further as I present why the Simpsons still live in Kentucky unless they live in Missouri. First off, a lot of people who I suspect never actually watched my video were awfully quick to comment on it, saying that Springfield must be in Oregon because Matt Groening is from Oregon. Google it and you'll find out that Matt Groening himself has stated that is not necessarily the case. He did say in one interview that Springfield was the name of a town close to his hometown of Portland, Oregon, and that inspired the name of the fictitious town in The Simpsons. But he immediately issued a statement the following day to clear up any misconceptions about the Simpsons Springfield being in Oregon. He didn't say that it's not, but he did say that it's not necessarily the case. So if you're still clinging to the belief that Springfield must be in Oregon, update your info. That was in 2012. It's old news. Old, fake news. So, why am I cautiously changing my stance and saying that Missouri is now a strong contender for the home state of The Simpsons? Well, for a start, a lot of the geography and history-based evidence I put forward for Kentucky works pretty well for Missouri too, which is logical since the two states do border each other. But a few new tidbits of trivia need to be taken into account. First, as a few of you have pointed out, the Simpsons movie claims that Springfield borders 4 states.
You can see the 4 states that border Springfield: Ohio, Nevada, Maine, and Kentucky.
And yes, I knew that when I made my original video, and then I half-heartedly claimed that the movie is considered non-canon and therefore it doesn't count.
Bullshit! Bullshit!
Yes, that was a cop-out and I knew it. The truth is, I conveniently ignored it because it didn't fit my hypothesis. So, like a piss-poor scientist, I left it out instead of simply addressing it. And there was no point in trying to deny it in the first place because it's not like any Springfield state theory is foolproof anyway. Now, in my defense, I was trying to keep that video as short and to the point as possible, and I didn't want to muddy the waters any further than I had to, and ultimately I stand by that decision. But now that I'm making a somewhat shorter follow-up video, I'll go ahead and mention it. Yes, that line does weaken the Kentucky argument, but it does slightly strengthen the Missouri argument, and since it's a nonsensical statement anyway, basically that a small town like Springfield is about a quarter of the area of the entire continental United States, I'm not that concerned by it. So, let's get into Meteor Subjects. In the season 12 episode, A Tale of Two Springfields, the Springfield area code was shown to be 636, which is a real area code that is actually in use in St. Louis, Missouri. The episode aired on November 5th, 2000, and while the 636 area code was still very new, it had been in use since May 22nd, 1999, a full year and a half before the episode aired. So one could argue that the producers of the show knew of the existence of the 636 area code and where it was located and went ahead with it anyway. This somewhat confirms my belief that Springfield is in the mid-southeast region. It's not Kentucky, but it is still pretty close. Now, the main problem with this is that the new Springfield area code was 939, which would place it somewhere in Puerto Rico, which I think is pretty unlikely. One of the more damning pieces of evidence against Springfield being in Kentucky is that their TV and radio stations all start with K, such as KBBL. As many of you have pointed out, call signs west of the Mississippi start with K, and call signs east of the Mississippi start with W. So if Springfield were in fact located in Kentucky, their stations would also start with a W. But, as I have pointed out to you on numerous occasions, there are exceptions to this rule. In real life, as far as I know, none of those exceptions exist in Kentucky. The ones I know of are in Kansas City, Fort Worth, and Philadelphia. But in the Simpsons universe, one very well could exist, especially if Springfield is close to the Mississippi River. Now, I'm willing to admit the exceptions are few, and I was really just kind of grasping at straws in order to contradict a strong piece of evidence that undermined my theory. Nevertheless, my point remains valid. Exceptions do exist. And if I alter my hypothesis just slightly and posit that Springfield lies just 100 miles away from Kentucky in the St. Louis area, that would also put it west of the Mississippi, making KBBL's call sign much easier to explain. It was also pointed out to me that in another season 12 episode, Simpsons' Tall Tales, the family is shown crossing the Mississippi River as they travel to Delaware. That means their journey started west of the Mississippi, while Kentucky is to its east. So unless that's just a bizarre train route, which is not impossible, or they hop the train somewhere other than Springfield, well, it means that Springfield must also be west of the Mississippi River and therefore not in Kentucky. Well, what city is just immediately to the west of the Mississippi River? That's right, St. Louis, Missouri. And the train is clearly marked Union Pacific, which does in fact pass through St. Louis. But if you want to start getting really technical about this, the Union Pacific Railroad does not travel through Kentucky, but it also does not travel to Delaware. So there's no way that the family could have taken that particular train all the way to Delaware, even though the end of the episode shows them getting off of that same Union Pacific train in a stop that is declared to be Delaware. So rather than answer any questions, that little detail has just raised more. But if we're gonna talk about Missouri, we have to talk about this line from the season 6 episode, Homer Badman.
I'll be deep in the cold, cold ground before I recognize Missouri.
It wouldn't make much sense for Grandpa to say this if they lived in Missouri. And I have used the argument that if they mention a state by name, it means they're probably not from that state many times in my original video. So why am I backtracking now? Well, for one thing, I have come to accept that no state has incontrovertible evidence going for it, and I think it's safe to say that all 50 states have been ruled out by at least one little quip or one little line somewhere in the last 30 years worth of episodes, and this may just happen to be Missouri's disqualifier. However, there are two possibilities as to why this may not be the case. The first is that Grandpa may be so senile that he has no idea what state he's in, or even that he's lived his entire life in Missouri. The case for senility is overwhelming.
No, I ain't senile, Dad, blast it! Which one of you is the mailman?
The second is that he somehow opposes Missouri on some principle and refuses to accept it as a state. Now, his political views have been questionable on a number of occasions.
The next time I saw Hitler, we had dinner and laughed about it.
And this may simply be another example of that, so I wouldn't rule out Missouri on the basis of this line alone. Unfortunately, it's not the only time that Missouri has been mentioned by name. Going back again to the 7th season episode Bart on the Road, which I discussed at length in my previous video, the boys pass through a city filled with neon signs, which Bart identifies as
Branson, Missouri.
Now, we've been through this before, and it's unlikely that they would have specified Branson, Missouri if they lived in Missouri. On the other hand, these are kids, and not particularly bright ones at that, so who can say? Oh, fun little fact. Branson, Missouri is about 60 miles south of Springfield, Missouri, and would probably be right on the route that someone would take on the way to Knoxville, Tennessee, as the boys did in this episode. Not conclusive, just saying. So, what do you think? Does Missouri sound even more plausible than Kentucky? Or do you disagree with both hypotheses?
Prove me wrong, kids. Prove me wrong.
The debate will undoubtedly continue for as long as The Simpsons is on TV, which is looking to be forever. At this point, even if the creators did specify that Springfield is in such and such state,
I can't believe they stuck us at Massachusetts.
it still wouldn't end the debate because by now they've planted so many false clues and red herrings that no one would even believe them. So this continues to be an exercise in futility, albeit an entertaining one. As I've said before, debate is the cornerstone of an educated society, and pointless debate is the cornerstone of geek society, so keep those comments coming. And, of course, you can show your support by liking and subscribing. Thanks a lot, we'll see you next time.
Worst episode ever.